every time. Every time I have to go in through and edit something, it's no good. Hello, chat. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live stream of the Pre-Drinks podcast for the US Grand Prix. And if you're watching the live stream, you will note that we have finally replaced Tommy T. We've got rid of him. Thank goodness for that. Gone in the bin forever. And Freya is joining us. If you're on the Discord, you will know Freya. I've actually just noted that you've got a DR shirt behind you, so that's excellent.
Ah, lovely.
That is excellent stuff. But it's great to have you, mate. For our live stream people, give us a little bit of a rundown of where you are and what you do and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's actually a hoodie, so based on where I live, I don't get to wear it very often. I just turn the AC down and so I live in the Cayman Islands actually. So I went from a little island that gets left off a map. You literally can't find on a map anywhere else in the world. Traditions, it's fine. But yeah, it's a good time here. There's the pretty stock standard corporate stuff, and it's pretty nice out in the sun to chase the heat. I go that one, but yeah, so in a big way. What else do you want to know?
Great. We'll save a couple of questions about how you got an F1 and all that sort of stuff for the podcast, I think. But Campy, mate, how are you? You doing all right?
I'm well, mate. I'm well. I've been up since 5 this morning.
Oh.
Went round to my dad's joint and we watched the All Blacks USA, which was nice.
Ooh.
16 tries to 2, so that was a good result for us. Bit tired, but we're ready to go. Watch qualifying afterwards, which was good qualifying actually.
Great
Super
qualifying.
excited. So
yeah,
looking forward to tomorrow morning.
Yes.
You enjoy the morning bacon and eggs with your colleague.
It's very bizarre.
It was good. It was very good.
I've
been doing it for 2 years, but hey, this is the first time we've technically been allowed. So
good. All right. All right, guys. Well, chat, as always, if you're there, say hello. Feel free to do all that sort of other stuff. But I think, guys, we will just get into it if you are ready to go.
Nice.
Cool. Max Verstappen takes pole. Hamilton starts alongside him on the front row, and Daniel Ricciardo out-qualifies Lando Norris. G'day there. My name is James Baldwin, and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this podcast, we talk in a pre-drinking fashion about the US Grand Prix. And I'm joined by, two friends, but not the typical friends that you would know. It is Campy as always. Hello there, mate.
How are you? Good.
Doing very well.
Gentlemen and ladies.
There we go. Well, here we go. Just drop it already. Take the bloody shine away from her. But it's Freya from the Cayman Islands joins us in replacing Tommy T. How you doing?
Very well. Glad to be here.
It's too late. I've already said it now. One thing that you will learn, Freya, is if one of us pops off the podcast, the other two have to say, "Oh well, it's so much better without him." And so last time that happened to me, I got basically replaced, didn't I, Campy?
Absolutely.
It is what it is. We'll do some housekeeping first. A massive shout out and thank you to you if you are watching us on YouTube. As I keep saying, we're serving the algorithm here. We've had 566 subscribers. We're getting very close to the 1,000 subs. Basically means that we get some advertising revenue when we finally earn some cash through YouTube for the podcast. It also means that we don't have to partner with big brands for random things that make you have to go and buy something for us to get some kind of revenue. That's not how we like doing things. So thank you for doing that. And a massive shout out to you if you're in the USA. Of course, we've got a heap of listeners in Australia, which is fantastic, but so many people, especially after the Monza win for Danny Rick, have joined us from the US. Specific shout out to Hillary, who has been sending me photos from COTA today as she was trackside. You have been great. I've got some inside goss on the tattoo for Zach Brown before it was officially announced, so that was nice. Thank you to you for that. And thanks to wherever you're listening in the world. It's so great to have you here, and it's great to be able to talk all things Formula One with you. Freya, look, we spoke on a live stream just before we started recording the audio podcast, but for those listening, you've got a Danny Rick hoodie behind you, but you're obviously another Australian, which ties in with the Lakeside Drive vibe. Where are you from originally, and how did you get into loving Formula One?
I said, yeah, earlier, I'm from Tassie, a little island, other side of the world, and yeah, that does mean I don't get to wear my DR hoodie very often because I've moved to Cayman, which is pretty freaking hot most of the time. So we don't have seasons here. But how did I get into F1? Funnily, a lot of people who are shocked to hear this, I genuinely didn't even know thing when I was young. But when I moved to Melbourne, we used to noise. I was like, "What is that sound? What is this?" I just didn't even know. And then a couple of mates kind of Formula One, and it kind of there. I suppose used to try and earn some money at uni, down at Albert Park and that type of thing.
Yep.
Then yeah, and then got some cool experiences. I suppose went and filled in a hairpin at Monaco and stuff like that when we were traveling. Just yeah, it's just been a thing that I've kind of always atmosphere of it all. I think geniuses. I find the personalities of the drivers fascinating. The whole sport's phenomenal. So yeah, pretty into it these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's so much to love about the sport, and it's getting better and better, and obviously the world is loving it more and more. I have to ask this question though: how did you find out about this podcast, and what did you think of Campy when you first heard his pretty voice?
Yeah, you've seen me,
Well,
so it's
how did I
underwhelming.
find about it? I didn't expect the beard. I'm going to say that actually.
Oh, there you go.
But I think I was just looking for more content, in all honesty, and everything. So I was just kind of just Googling, you know, Daniel Ricciardo, ABCD, everything, and that's actually I think how I came across it. But I wasn't really loving the stuff that I was hearing in a lot of ways. The British kind of bias, which we are all too aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I just got a bit fed up with it, and yeah, was just looking for more content really. And then I think stumbled across you guys.
Well,
actually, really quickly, there was a comment in the Discord about I think Australian that were moving overseas, and they started like there's something about hearing the Australian take on things, the Australian banter and everything else, and there's something about that which is actually a really cool connection when you're not in the country. So yeah, it's pretty cool to have.
Especially the dulcet tones of Campy, wherever you are in the world, you get dragged right back to feeling like you're in full Australian mode, full Andrew Bolt mode.
It's funny you say that. When I've done traveling, it's so funny. You change the way you talk to sort of to meet the need of the particular culture you're in. But whenever you bump into another Australian, people are like, you just start talking alien and we cannot even follow or vaguely understand what you're saying. So hopefully it comes across okay in the podcast for the international listeners, but we do have a very particular way of talking, and it's not great at times. So I apologise for that profusely.
Every podcast.
I'm probably the worst at it.
No, mate, to be honest, you've got a lot better since...
don't bring it up. But...
Jan, Feb 2019, I've removed our very first couple of podcasts from the RSS feed, so you can't go back and listen to it because we were just so embarrassed listening back. But no, it's good, mate. And look, at the end of the day, we do this and people start listening because they want a different opinion. And as we keep saying, as much as we're Danny Rick focused, of course, everyone else gets a shout out, including Nikita Mazepin, and not always in a bad way. Most of the time it's in a bad way, but he always gets a shout out, which is unlike most podcasts that you listen to. It's everything else. Anyway, look, that's all great. Let's get into talking about practice and qualifying, shall we? A little bit of news before that, though. Giovinazzi still isn't confirmed for Alfa Romeo for next year. I read during the week that the Andretti deal has been rumoured to been done. It's all been tied up. Sauber are going to be well, they're moving on from their Swedish partners to Andretti, which is good news. Look, we spoke a little bit about this last week, Campy, in terms of what this potentially means for Oscar Piastri, noting that Guan Yu Zhou hasn't been confirmed yet, and there's a few other bits and pieces. But overall, what do we think about Andretti's sort of take into Formula One again?
Oh, excellent. I think it's great for the sport. It's good for America, obviously. I mean, Alpha's been good. They've been in the sport for a long time. Unfortunately for them, I don't think they've got the financial backing to put into the teams, the top teams, what they're doing to get the results on track. But they've been solid performer and consistent in F1. Probably makes a lot of sense for them to move on, get some more cash injection. And Andretti, I mean, the things they're doing in particularly in the States is excellent. So they'll just build the brand. I mean, they'll try and rival Haas. I think that'll be their target. That'll be the two teams we sort of look for, they're running for. But I mean, cash coming in, cash injection's great. Obviously, there'll be a whole new corporate culture come in as well, and there'll be some intellectual property from across different sports and philosophies on how to make cars go fast. So hopefully they get that right. I just think they've got to get the second driver right. And new team, why not get a rookie in like Oscar Piastri? I think it's looking good for us. But look, who knows? They may want to go down the money route for a couple of years, but it'll depend on Alpine whether Alpine want to let him go or not. So.
Well, we know that Alpine have said that, they will be happy to let Oscar go in the same way that they've said they'll be happy to let Guan Yu Zhou go to, make sure that his career is sort of set, not go as in see it forever. It's sort of like the Albon arrangement with Williams and Red Bull, that he's still technically a Red Bull driver, even though he's driving the Williams car. But Freya, for Oscar Piastri, I mean, it would be good news, perfect timing almost, that Andretti was kind of then rumoured, then it was almost confirmed. I think we'll probably hear in the next week or so that it has been confirmed for him to get this. But at least, even if he doesn't get it, he's not spending the last couple of races in Formula 2 thinking about, the fact that he doesn't have a drive for Formula 1. There's still a chance, isn't there?
Yeah, like there's no better place for a rookie. You've got Bottas beside you, like just to do there. It'd be such an exciting time. I think with let's assume that new ownership comes through. You just kind of hope for him that is what happens, because I don't think there's a better spot for when it comes to the kind of how those stars have aligned, I suppose, with who you've got racing beside you and new ownership and change. And there'll be other people who are unfamiliar with stuff, right? Like you won't be the only new guy there. And I think it would be a great place for him. Let's just hope it comes through.
Yeah, or especially for 2022, brand new car. We've already heard that Lando Norris is not feeling that comfortable with the 2022 car in comparison to Danny Rick. He's like, I quite like it. We're like, woo!
He's not feeling real comfortable in the 2021 car at the moment compared to his teammates. So,
let's talk a little bit about his teammate because look, Danny Rick obviously won the bet with Zach, which was awesome. We've seen him already today in Dale Earnhardt Senior's NASCAR, the number 3 NASCAR, and geez, he whatever the camera position was, I think it was like coming up to the hairpin down the back of the track. You could just see his smile through the windscreen, because obviously you don't see Danny Rick's facial expressions most of the time, but that was probably my favorite part, just seeing him do that. Of course, for the F1's weekend warm-up, he did a full interview with Lawrence Barretto in a Texan accent and absolutely crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. But he just bloody loves this place, doesn't he? I mean, it was a good qualifying session for him. It was a fairly good practice session, especially in FP3. He got to drive one of his heroes' race cars, and the team boss, he value added to the bet by getting a tattoo in Texas, which Campy knows about. And of a Monza track with the date of the victory. I mean, it's all good news. And I mean, from a team point of view, Freya, and from a leadership point of view, like Zach's he loves making a deal, doesn't he? But the way he's leading this team and pushing it through, it's almost like, it's the perfect setup now, isn't it, for DR for the rest of this season and into 2022.
Completely. I absolutely love him. And he just seems to strike him as like perfect being part of the team, but still being that leader. I think swing either way. Whereas he's there doing what he said he was going to do, establishing what just back at the factory. I think he's just hitting all of the goals hit by Zach, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But from a
Yes.
leadership perspective, you can't fault him right now, I don't think.
No, and especially with, his vision and mission for McLaren as a whole group. I mean, let's not forget the road cars. Every time I see McLaren, I just go, all of them are beautiful. It's not like some Ferraris you go, you can take it or leave it. But, well, obviously this is just my point of view. But the whole thing as a whole, for racing and road cars, this guy is in charge of both of them in some capacity. But he's just surrounding himself with amazingly talented people. Campy, we've spoken about Andreas Seidel time and time again, haven't we? But he more sort of focused on that F1 side. And, of course, going into 2022, he's going to be happy with how DR's performing, especially in the last couple of races.
Well, we expected it, really, didn't we? Obviously, there's good culture within the sport, and he's getting it together, which we knew he would, and he's coming strong. You don't invest 25 million euro or pound a year or what into these drivers because you think they're crap, and they get in and have half a bad year and struggling to adapt to a car. They're thinking long term with this, 2 or 3 years out. They've got their eyes firmly fixed on breaking into that, the top two, probably fighting for championships next year, if not into 2023. So that's the way they're looking. But my question, I've got a question for you, Freya, putting a professional hat on and analysing people for a job. What is the difference between someone like a Lawrence Stroll and the way he runs his organisation and the way that, say, Zach Brown runs the organisation? Obviously, Lawrence Stroll's got some big goals for manufacturing and car manufacturing, not just on track, but off track with the electrification of our industry. But, they're two very different personalities and two very different ways of going about it. What insights can you give us into where the teams are at and why sometimes it works and why it doesn't?
I think a super interesting question. According to Freya, it's not any type of person.
Love that. I'll take it.
That's the Lakeside driveway, Freya.
But,
it's biblical truth. It's biblical.
Yeah. But when they are interviewed and stuff, and their businesses and their teams and their goals and all of that stuff, Zach and Andreas both are talking a lot about McLaren. They're talking about surrounding themselves with amazing people. I actually spend very little time talking kind of about most of the time talking about people around them and how success for them. And I think that getting that balance in terms of being, but they're not. They still hold back from a leadership perspective, especially when it comes to Andreas. So they've got that dynamic that's really interesting. From comes to Stroll, I think it's quite interesting because is that the interview recently he did kind of say hire all the best people essentially, but he talked a lot about his kind of saying, me and my business success. Got this track record when it comes to my business and this, that, and the other. Interesting when it comes to how you on others versus yourself when it comes to how you're going to make any enterprise, a successful one. Time will tell. I think he did also say, wouldn't have been able to do this if all of these things didn't kind of come when it comes to, the caps and that, I wouldn't have been able to Red Bulls and Mercedes of the world. So, yeah, there's very different leadership styles and way of going about things. One thing that I have noticed, the way they talk about their success is kind of focus, which will be interesting.
So do you think Lawrence Stroll would palm off the culture side to somebody else within the team and say, look, I'm just here as an overseer and putting everything together at the top. You answer to me and I want results, but you're the person that I'm putting in charge to drive culture within the team and stuff like that, whereas opposed to Zach Brown's the CEO where he is the driving force. It's almost like a servant leadership type of way of looking at it. They almost lead in a way that puts them out of a job that if they stepped aside, someone else would step in straight away. To me, that looks like the better way, but yeah.
Careful here, we're going to take this down the forks, like.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of servant leadership is actually really interesting. We do talk about a lot in our profession. Who's in a leadership role sees themselves as being there for everybody else, as opposed to everybody else being there for.
Yep.
And also the control and the power side of a big interesting term in this type of setting. And again, it's like you hit the nail on the head when it comes to particular has inserted himself when it comes to the and yeah, I think it'll be interesting, like you said, was not the best person out there to, you know, be set business from a culture perspective. Not no, but,
Love that.
Yeah, they might say, yeah, you can hire the best people we can for every role that's available. So if and that would also take a bit of real expertise. So that's sometimes itself, but yeah, very different styles.
It's interesting from a point of view that Zach is the same. He wants to hire the best people, and in fact, I think he has done. But instead of maybe drawing them with the big cash backing that Lawrence is potentially doing, he's drawing them in from a culture point of view. Of course, I mean, he was working in sports marketing and sponsorships before he got this gig. He applied for it, has been a McLaren fan his entire life. He's a racer as well. It's slightly different kind of backgrounds in that respect. But it's pretty clear to me, and Campy, that's a great point that you raised in terms of if Zach steps out, the team keeps going. And let's not forget, it's been since Monza that Zach was at a Formula One Grand Prix. He's been at IndyCar for the last couple of weekends, so he wasn't there for Russia. He wasn't there for Turkey. But we didn't necessarily notice any real difference in the team because Andreas has got control, right? So, you know, when the issues happened with Russia and Lando not pitting and everything else, like, Andreas would have taken that regardless if Zach was there or not. He's like, right, the buck stops with me in this point. You know, I'm not blaming anyone else. It is what it is. But for when Zach comes back, obviously the socials light up and whoever runs McLaren social media has a much better time because there's just more wholesome dad content as he's there in his sneakers, in his polo shirt tucked in.
Carlos.
And Carlos and Renault. More of that. And Grand Prix.
That's what needs to happen though. You know, he needs to have a situation in the business where you're steps away and the whole thing crumbles underneath you. You know, it should be, that's exactly how it should be. It runs itself. You know, if you're off, you know, tending to all the other business, it needs to keep, the engine needs to keep going. And if it's really problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about some racing, shall we, or some qualifying bits and pieces as well. Look, practice was interesting. The only real interesting moment for me was Lewis and Max going up the main straight together, which seemed a little bit unnecessary, but all for Netflix's Drive to Survive banter now that Max has told them to bugger off. They're like, righto, that's picked a side for us. We're on Lewis's side. Campy, what did you think of that little moment?
Oh, look, I just think I don't read into it too much. I think they're probably trying to get into their heads. I don't think it's a planned little game that someone's going to cut someone off and Max mouths off while he's on the radio. Oh, man, it's good for us to watch and we can read into it, but I don't think there's too much into it. If anything, it's just, you know, they're trying to tilt some conversation to try and put them off that way because you know you're not going to put them off on track and in the garage because these guys are so strong and the media is probably the only place they can play out their battle other than the on-track stuff and try and get inside their head. We know what type of drivers these two are, world-class toe-to-toe at the moment. It's fascinating as fans to watch, and we've got 6 races left. It's going to be pretty special, so I think any minuscule amount of one-upmanship you can get on the other guy, I think is probably going to work. So
it's interesting as well because we've just had the F1 Global Survey. That's couple of the questions in that were, you know, who's your favourite driver and team and everything else.
Lando.
But the fact that McLaren's a favourite team is exciting. But does it surprise you, Freya, that Max is the favourite driver? And is it because he's in a real opportunity here to win the championship that's the case and someone like DR or Lewis isn't?
I think at first I was, and then I remember actually no.
Yeah, good point.
It makes total sense to me. But no, you're right. Like, you know, with that success comes popularity for sure. And I don't know, I think all right form, you know, over the last kind of month or so, fun with some of the press stuff they're doing and things like that. But yeah, after I saw that less surprised, but please.
Oh, and he's the favourite with women. What sort of women choose Lando? I mean, younger generation haven't been parented well,
That's a
educated
young
poorly.
one.
Educated poorly, parented poorly. That's why they choose
There
such
it
poorly
is.
men. So, that's what I'll go with.
Oh man, but I mean, for Lewis though, like, I mean, he's come almost in a way. He's sort of come out of a domination period. This year, he's not had the domination that he's had in previous years. You know, now that Max has been touted as the favourite driver, all these other things, I suppose it's Formula One's way from an entertainment point of view of just, giving Max another opportunity to have a bit of a leg up. I did think it was interesting that the opening sequence for the US Grand Prix was just like every race that we've had so far and what's happened between Lewis and Max, whether it was a win for either of them or a crash for either of them. It was just an interesting way of tying it up. I think, well, yes, that's an interesting battle a little bit. But then we come through qualifying and practice and we see people like Sergio Perez, who has been really not where he should have been all year, absolutely smashing it out of the park. I mean, yes, he qualified third and he sort of had a final lap with a little bit of rain that maybe disrupted him a bit, but that's great. Like, that is a mega story for us to be able to talk about. Sergio Perez really on the limit with Max. It's the first time, or the second time, according to Karun Chandok, that he started going away from Max's setup and started doing his own setup. So that's really great too. It just means there's a bit of confidence coming in for him as well. But overall, yeah, interesting for Lewis because, suddenly he's not the top dog when it comes to dominating the championship in both the drivers and constructors and being fan favourites. I mean, he's got a huge following, of course, on his social media. But it'd be an interesting sort of thought process now being slightly on the older end of the paddock, isn't he, compared to Lando and Max even at the younger end, thinking, well, I've only really got 2 years left and then I'm out. But, Campy, does that get in the way of his championship thoughts for this year, or is that make him hungrier?
No, I don't think it gets in the way of his championship thoughts at all. But what we're seeing is a change of the guard, changing in the guard. I mean, you can look at some of the greatest sportsmen in the history. Michael Jordan, when he was the new sheriff in town, when he was taking over Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, he's like, I'm the new number one. And cricket in Australia with some of the great cricketers we've had, like when Ricky Ponting retires and Michael Clark comes in and these young guys come in and take over. You look at every sport, you see it. And we're in that stage now where it's just before the takeover's probably going to happen, but they're still fighting, and they're bloody even at the moment. So I think we've got an exciting, rest of the year anyway, whether we see Lewis go on for another year and drive the way he has. But we're definitely in that change in the guard, whether Max goes on to have a career like he should. And, if he gets in the right car like Lewis did, we could see him win 10 on the trot pretty easily. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But we're living in that moment now where it's like, the old and the new are meeting and they're really close together.
Freya, do you think also noting, that every sport has a dominating team or manufacturer or whatever for a short period of time or a slightly longer period of time, and then they tumble down the order? We've seen that with Williams in the past. We've seen that with McLaren more recently, and then getting back towards the top. Is it Mercedes' turn to take a tumble off the top step when it comes to 2022 and have, potentially the dominance of McLaren? I mean, they're on the upward trajectory, and of course, we'd love DR to be that world champion. But if Lewis doesn't win this year, is that potentially it? And obviously, we don't really know what 2022 looks like, but if he isn't in a championship fighting car, maybe he kind of wished he got out this year.
From a Lewis perspective, you can say he's focused on his legacy and that type of thing. I think if he wins this year, that'll be kind of another feather. He'll love that, and from there, I think he'll really focus on what he is contributing to the sport, kind of beyond as well, in terms of or beyond results. I think it's the timing of though, right? Like, I think it would be we've had a totally different conversation if there weren't so many changes due for next year. They would be very essentially Alpha would be in terms of going, you've got this a new, still relatively amazing setup, yada yada yada. They very different conversation, but I think with all the changes coming in, it's a bit of a different story. But I don't think he would regret not getting out earlier if he doesn't win this year. I think he's focused on what he'll leave the sport with, both from terms of everything else. That he's obviously pretty focused and passionate.
Let's talk about his qualifying, because he seemed pretty despondent, didn't he, when he jumped out of the car at the end? He went straight inside the garage to be weighed on the scales, where everyone who's not the top three normally gets weighed, rather than in the separate scales, which I thought was just an interesting vibe. He clearly needed to take a couple of moments. He still had the helmet on, which is an indicator of I don't really want to talk to anyone right now. It was a great lap that he did. The fact that Red Bull was, really pushing these guys all weekend, and all the way to the end, I was thinking at least second row was going to be best for him, because Perez was on it for the entire time. But it's nothing to be upset by, Campy, is it, second? And especially when it comes to Coda in that first corner, it almost suits being in that second position rather than being in P1 for being able to get a better angle around the corner.
Yeah, look, I think he's despondent because Friday they came out and they were a second ahead of everybody, and they just thought they were going to cruise on. Whatever's happened over the weekend, people have picked up pace. We haven't saw the difference between, Danny Rick from practice 1 to practice 2 and into practice 3. So obviously there's some things changing on the circuit and it's evolving. Mercedes didn't get it quite right, but to be 3 tenths behind Perez after his first lap in Q3, and to then qualify 2 tenths quicker to then be pipped by Verstappen on the end, I mean, it just shows the quality of the driver to pull out 5 tenths on his previous time in a clutch moment like that. I think first and second these days, there's not a big difference. It's all down to the start. If we go off what we've seen for the year so far, a lot of the time the second place guy's jumping the first place guy, and Hamilton's been on the wrong side of that going into turn 1. You want to make sure your exit's good, because you go into that S section and you can be right up the chuff of somebody. So look, I think he'll be confident going into the race, because I think they showed some race pace, but it'll be decided off the line, I think, and then pit stops. I mean, all it takes is for someone to not flick a switch on the after they've changed on the gun. So I mean, that's where the sport's going to be. This is where the title's going to be decided this year, and that's probably the most exciting thing for us watching at home.
Yeah, I'll use a Tommy T word. It's a lot of jeopardy. We like a bit of jeopardy here on Lakeside Drive. But yeah, from that point of view, it was good. But Sergio Perez, let's talk about him as well. Freya, again, stunning all weekend. As I mentioned before, he's gone away from copying Max's setup of the car. He's found a little bit more pace, and he's obviously more comfortable. He seems happier outside the car, which is good. He's been pretty despondent for the last couple of races. It's good to have him back. He was almost on pole. At one moment, we thought if the rain didn't appear at the very last lap, potentially he could have done as well. But he'd be feeling a lot happier, wouldn't he?
I think so. He's been on fire all weekend. You saw such a shift in his just overall kind of confidence and everything else. And like you said, you do wonder if that kind of comes down to taking some ownership of the setup and that type of thing, and really starting to do his own thing a little bit. I think it can't be an easy, as we've saying, with everybody else driver. It's just not easy. I think if that's right, that he started taking ownership of dealing with his own setup, showing more authority in that way. I don't know, but it's playing out, and you see it on the weekends from was on. You saw that with obviously it wasn't just on race day. It was start to finish. He showed see that in Perez this weekend. I was really hoping pole, if I'm being honest. I thought it was his, but I'm excited to see that his head's there.
He's in a rear gunner position, Campy, isn't he? Perfect to try and get past Lewis and hold him, or make him have to do a different strategy decision based on whatever Max is doing. Of course, if Lewis gets past Max, it's not as strong, but as Christian Horner said after the after qualifying, that his job is to support the team, support his teammate. He knows that. There's obviously no bones about that. That both Bottas and Perez are able to do that. But for him, I mean, this is the best opportunity that he's got for Max to win, which is annoying, can I just say, because I made Lewis my mega driver for fantasy this weekend, thinking, going down the same path as the MotoGP thing here. I was like, well, if Marc Marquez can come back and just dominate, surely Lewis. Anyway, it's a huge mistake that I've made. But anyway, talk to us about that, Campy.
Yeah, look, he's in the perfect position. I mean, Valtteri, how many bloody penalties has this guy got to take? Seems like he's taken. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, he'd be frustrated because Bottas can play a role then too, dictating if he had have started where he qualified. So that's a shame. But yeah, look, the race will be interesting. I think if Max gets it off the line, he'll just do what Max does and charge. He'll just go as hard as he can. Whereas I think if Hamilton gets out front, they'll run at a pace for the first, 15 laps, so they can extend their plan A by, 5 or 6 laps, which gives them some options at the end because it looks like it'll be a one-stop. The beauty of having Perez behind is that you can put pressure on Mercedes early to not stick to their strategy so that, if they have some chances at the end of the race with fresher rubber, I think that's the way they'll be looking to play Sergio. But then, I mean, Carlos Sainz starts on soft, so he could get a start and he could negate that by jumping a couple of positions off the start too. So there could always be an incident. Gets really tight into turn one. We saw MotoGP here, 3 weeks ago, and I mean the congestion into turn one is pretty hectic, and the previous starts here. If you get the line right and that drive out of turn one going in the S's, it can be really good. So, and yet breaking uphill on cold tyres, so it just throws more things into it as well. Yeah, who knows? It's going to be a fun start tomorrow, and hopefully there's a bit of rain on the start, and Valtteri can come through. Yeah, well, that's why we need Mr. Bernie Eccleston back, so we can get some sprinklers on track, so we can just put them on 10 minutes before the race, and it'd be exciting. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, I'm glad for Sergio. It's good to see him do well. As we said last time, we were super glad after Abu Dhabi last year that he was announced to be taking Red Bull. It's also good that Albon's coming back into the fold. So that situation has righted itself. That's for sure. Look, you mentioned Carlos Sainz, Campy, and I want to talk about Ferrari because the pace is here. They sort of showed it a little bit through free practice as well. Potentially they've set up for qualifying more so than race pace. We know that the McLarens are very good on tyre degradation in comparison to the Ferraris, but as you say, Carlos Sainz starts on the softs. It's worth 10 metres. He's got his teammate in front of him, Charles Leclerc in fourth, and Sergio Perez in third. So what really do you think we can expect from Ferrari, Campy, to sort of, I suppose, throw some more jeopardy in potentially, as you say, with Carlos Sainz, for Red Bull and Mercedes, but also McLaren?
Yeah, well, I mean, the fight for third in the Constructors' Championships, that's up for grabs. But I think there's only 10 points or so in it. So, considering after McLaren got that 1-2 in Monza, I just thought they would have streamed ahead, but it wasn't the case. I mean, they only extended the points lead in that by about, I think it was 20 odd points. So, look, I didn't think this was a McLaren track. There's too many medium speed, long corners, so it doesn't suit their car. I actually thought this was a track that would suit Ferrari over McLaren, and we saw that, by a couple of tenths realistically in qualifying. Sainz on the soft probably should have qualified a bit better, but they've given themselves options for the race, right? So their pace wasn't too good considering what we've seen in the previous races with their pace. Compared to McLaren on the tracks that they want. So I think it's a good sign for McLaren. And if they can, I think Sainz drops a couple of places just on strategy.
Yeah.
And if they can jump Leclerc, then, it's another race down and ticked off the box where McLaren's got to win when they probably shouldn't have. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Freya? Because we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the power upgrade that was brought with Charles Leclerc in Russia. We didn't really see all that much. And then, of course, Carlos had it for Turkey, and that was really the only car that did anything any good at that racetrack at all, was him snaking his way through the field. He's a great driver. There is no denying that. He also runs his own strategy, much like Seb did at Ferrari, which is probably good for him. It could be an interesting moment if we get a red flag, if we get some. I mean, there's almost guaranteed in my mind that there's going to be some kind of spin by someone through those S's in the first lap because of dirty air and how close they're going to be. Maybe being on those red walled soft tires is gonna suit him.
I think it could. I mean, if he had, like you said, it all comes down to that start, right? If he's aggressive off the start and soft, I think he could have a really, really interesting race. I mean, he's shown that he can, that he can make his way through the track, through his field. So I think he'll. Oh gosh, I'm going for him this weekend. Obviously not over McLaren, obviously, but I think he's showing some pretty good form over the last couple of weeks, and you kind of want to see them kind of be able to capitalise on that a little bit. But I think for him, it'll all come down to that start and what happens. And yeah.
Well, definitely down the back of the grid, I can almost guarantee it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but for Charles Leclerc, like, he hasn't had an ability to have a good race for a long time because of just the power deficit to those both Mercedes and Honda power units, I should say. The Ferrari power unit now catching up. Campy, his racecraft is good. This is kind of a circuit that suits someone that's got good racecraft like him and DR in a lot of ways. Do you think that a podium is potential for him if he can get himself in front of Red Bull?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, totally. I mean, Ferrari's shown pace at times this year, where I'm like, where has this come from? I think Leclerc, if he didn't lock up twice in last weekend's 2 weeks ago's race in Turkey, I mean, he could have won it. I mean, realistically, if he had stayed out in that wet race, so yeah, I mean, he'd be disappointed with the season that he's had, but yeah, look. Who knows?
Yeah.
He could, he couldn't. They could, but they can. I mean, we expect these guys to progress off the start a lot of the time because that's what we expect them to do. They're world class drivers. But if that happens, it always means there's going to be drivers that get shuffled back too. So I mean, don't count out Gasly from behind. He's had some mega starts this year in ninth, and he's behind Lando and Danny Rick. So I mean, he could throw a spanner in the works for all these guys. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But, I mean, the thing for me is, who do you guys think's had a better year out of Sainz and Leclerc this year?
Well, you go first, Freya.
I think Sainz has shown better racecraft, like you said last weekend. He had an amazing weekend before. I have no idea what day it is. Had some amazing overtakes when other people. I think he's had, he's actually, I think from a skill perspective, he's done an amazing. I think he's had some bad lockups in the last race, Monaco and everything else. So I think he. I think again the skill is there, but it's just not kind of turning itself into results. So my vote there goes.
Carlos, I'm with you because at the end of the day, he's the new driver to the team, so he has more excuses, if you will, in terms of being able to be a little slower. But the fact that he's driven the wheels off that thing and shown Ferrari that he knows what he's talking about in terms of strategy and everything else. I mean, his dad would be proud. It's very much a Carlos Sainz senior junior kind of vibe that he's got going on, and I'm stoked for him because he's obviously left McLaren, who's probably going to be a world championship team next year. Ferrari haven't had a world championship since Kimi in 2007, so whilst there's a love there and a passion there, it's not necessarily a super winning mentality there, but for him to come up sort of alongside Charles is a good thing. And let's not forget too, he wasn't really all that wanted in the paddock for a long time. He went from Toro Rosso, went to Renault, and then he got booted for Renault because of Danny Rick coming in to McLaren, and it kind of happened in a similar way again. But it's good for him. Plus, he's just a character. Like, he just seems like a genuinely nice guy. He's great teammates with whoever he's teammates with. Like, there's just none of that rude kind of attitude there. So no, it's good. It's good for Ferrari. We want to see them back towards the front. but not at the sacrifice of the McLarens, of course. Let's talk about the
I
McLarens.
feel like I need to clarify that. I feel like I need to clarify that earlier in terms of going, yeah, I want Sainz to have a good race, but let's be clear, not at the expense of a McLaren.
Exactly right. Yeah. Maybe one of the McLarens. I'm happy for him to be ahead of Lando, but for Danny Rick, let's just absolutely make sure that he's there. But for McLaren, as you said, Campy, we weren't necessarily expecting this track to suit them as well as it has done. But it's good news, though, of course. I love his new helmet design for this weekend. I think that looks fantastic. Even Lando's helmet looks great too. But from a team point of view, Campy, what do you think they can do this weekend? Obviously, Ferrari are their main competitors, and probably a podium's not on the cards, but sort of top five?
I think they're targeting fourth. They need one of their drivers in fourth, and they'd be hoping to split the Ferrari, beat both one car to beat both Ferraris and split it. So I think that's what they're looking for. Whether Danny Rick has the pace to do it, I think he's got the race pace. I think he's settled in the car enough. He's settled in enough in the car, and the race pace performance we've seen in comparison to Lando's, is there or thereabouts at the moment. So I don't think there'll be any team orders. I don't think we'll see any of the decisions that the team made earlier in the year to let Lando pass. But yeah, they'll be targeting fourth if nothing happens up the front. And if something happens up the front, then podiums it is. I don't think they've got enough to win the bag, but hey, it's motorsport. These things happen all the time. There's always been a couple of races where it's thrown out, and we know race pace-wise that McLaren have proved in Monza and Russia that they can lead from the front and potentially win. So, they are a genuine chance on race day. Their problem really is qualifying. So, but classic start tomorrow from DR, and he could be in, fourth or third, right in that, right in that spot, waiting for something to happen. So,
and Freya, we've seen Daniel get a little more comfortable with his starts in the last couple of races. He didn't have a great start to the year in terms of the whole car setup, and his starts were pretty bad, let's be honest. But he's more comfortable. He's able to get towards the front. And he's able to keep cars behind him. That's been the biggest thing. So long as he's on the right tyre strategy and the right choice alongside the cars around him, he's able to command a little bit more of that race pace. So if he does get past a couple of these cars, which, look, he's got two Ferraris and a Red Bull in front of him to get onto a podium. It absolutely is an opportunity. We know that when McLaren are on, they're on. With Monza, it was leading out of the first corner, fastest pit stop, fastest lap, P2 as well. If it all has to go right, and I think Campy mentioned it too, if one of the guys at Red Bull or Ferrari have either bad tyre choice or a bad pit stop or something else happens, he's able to get in there and pick up the points. So is there a real chance for him to get that podium this weekend?
I think it's a big ask, but it's Daniel Ricciardo,
yes.
and absolutely. It's because there's just so many variables.
Yeah.
You've got Hamilton going to, throw a hissy fit and crash some. Like Perez, who I want to see him on podium. I want to see signs up. I'd be interested to see if Charles has he has shown snippets of it, but confidence in keeping them behind him as well. Actually for the entire race, depending on what that starts. I think it'll be interesting to see if but big ask, but
good. Yeah. Well, the short answer is absolutely.
Yes.
And it would be nice. I'm here for a podium of Perez, Sainz, and Danny Rick. That'd be. I'm sure Carlos and Sergio would love to share a shoey with him. That'd be a big vibe. I also want to talk about AlphaTauri. Oh, 100%. Let's talk about AlphaTauri because Tsunoda actually did something this weekend, which was nice.
Yeah.
He in 10th,
2 weeks in a row.
Gasly in 8th, and only because Gasly's only 8th because of Bottas's penalty. He was right on the heels of Gasly for all of the qualifying. It was good. In fact, we saw it's unusual, really, isn't it, for us to see kind of the Red Bulls were fastest. Then Mercedes was second fastest, Ferrari third fastest, McLaren fourth fastest, and AlphaTauri were fifth fastest. And that top 10, having, looking at the list, there's no one that's an outlier from those teams, those 5 teams. It's the first time in quite a while that that's been the case. But for AlphaTauri, this is good news, isn't it, Campy? We've wanted Tsunoda to find his rhythm. He has found a driver coach in the nicest grid on the car driver in the grid on the car, Alex Albon. And apparently that's working really well. Well, evidently it's working really well. It also shows that Alex is just a nice guy and helping him out as well. But realistically, do you think he can have these kind of results, Campy, for the rest of this year to convince us that the decision to keep him was worth it?
Oh, I think you need to. I think he needs to get him for not only his own perception of his career and where it's at, but for the fan engagement too. Because I mean, there's two sides to this sport. But once you get comfortable and your psyche in your mind is in the right place, things can just happen for you that weren't happening before. It's like turning the tap on and off sometimes. So I think it's good for him. But then in saying that, we chatted about this last week. Anyone that's on the grid can drive. They've proved a lot in junior categories. Sonoda's no different. I think the difference in some of these younger drivers coming in is just how much time they have in the car. I mean, Tsunoda hasn't really, I mean, he had a good first race, but he tested there for, he did 500 odd laps before the race. So, given that experience in race one, he looked like he was okay. But, I mean, now we're, 17 races into a season, and that time has served him well, and it's starting to get some on-track performance. You can put it down to driving coaches and stuff. Well, maybe. But I just think time in the car and these guys will get better and better and better. And after 2 or 3 years, we've seen what some of the young guys like George cars and Latifi this year stepping up a bit. So, look, it's good for him, but it's a shame because I think you've got to put more pressure on these young drivers when you give them a chance to come in and perform relatively quickly. I mean, yeah, so that's where I'm sort of at with that.
I mean, it's not good when you had a contract extended and their response is, oh, it's not a great look, and it's not what you want to see. But glad to see him having some more results, I suppose, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
I think Red Bull as an organisation, though, are understanding of how they've treated, Albon, Gasly, Kvyat, and now Tsunoda coming in. I mean, all three of those, Kvyat, Gasly, and Albon, all got promoted way too early when they shouldn't have. There was just a necessity for someone to get a promotion up the top, and they wanted to promote within. They're not looking outside of their driver factory. So I think that plays into why he got a contract extension, because they've seen what they've done to 3 drivers now, and for it to happen to a 4th would suggest that corporate structure and culturally something's wrong, and we're doing something that's not right. So they actually need to address it and try and fix it. But I mean, Tsunoda will come into next year with that contract extension. It's like, right, it's day one again. Yep. Don't worry about your first year. You've learned what you've learned, but hey, this is day one. If you're not performing by race 5 or 6, then we get into the mid-year part of the year. They're like, that's when contract negotiations are happening. Yeah, you might perform in your last 4 or 5 races, but the decision's been made well before that. So for him, he's got another chance, and I think it's lucky to get a second chance in this sport, and that's exactly what he's got.
And it's because it's 2022, it's new cars, everyone's going to be learning again. This new type of car might suit his driving style better than others that are towards the front of the grid at the moment. But Freya, is Gasly in the bin for you, or is he like Tommy T and me, he's well and truly out of the bin?
Nah, he's out of the bin.
There you go.
Nah, Gasly...
I'll put you in the bin in a minute, right?
You have to figure out where Cayman is first. Nah.
Campy would find it. Trust me, he'd find it.
It's just south of Cuba, isn't it? It's in that general direction.
Yeah. Google Maps as well.
No, I was a geography whiz in high school, so no.
No, you just know where your accountant lives, mate, for your offshore accounts.
Gasly's not in the bin. I think Gasly's doing phenomenal things with that. I think it's a shame that he, like you said, had the because it's obviously it's a huge step up there, and he just didn't get what he needed. But I think he's doing exactly what he should. He's out of the bin. Bin's gone. He's not there.
It's a good answer. He's
Have a
doing good
word for
things.
it.
He's doing good things. I'm here for it. Well, look, I'll just run through the starting grid very quickly, and we can talk about what we're going to watch for in the race. Max Verstappen, of course, starting on pole. Lewis Hamilton in second. Sergio Perez in third. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz for Ferrari in fourth and fifth. Danny Rick and Lando Norris in sixth and seventh for McLaren. Gasly in eighth. Bottas starts in ninth. He's going to be interesting to watch. Sonoda in 10th. That rounds out the top 10. We've got Ocon, Giovinazzi, Stroll, Latifi, Raikkonen, Schumacher, and Mazepin. In the very end of the grid, we have three cars that are taking brand new engines in Seb Vettel, Fernando Alonso, and George Russell. It's interesting, isn't it, now that Bottas only got a 5-place grid penalty, for taking his 77th engine for the week. Mercedes having a bit of an issue, Campy, I think, in terms of reliability. It's not as strong as we've seen in the past. I mean, Danny Rick's had to take a new power unit. In this weekend, we've got Seb Vettel and an Aston Martin and George Russell and Williams taking new Mercedes power units. Is it potentially a concern for Lewis up the front and Mercedes up the front that something might go wrong in a reliability sense? Because we haven't seen that for some time, have we?
It's a good question. I really don't know. I don't think Mercedes will be worried about it. I think they're pretty on top of where their parts are at and what's happening is. But the engine part of the car, and the reason it's only a 5-place grid penalty is because it's almost old technology. Yes, they put work into it and R&D and that sort of stuff, but it's not the most technical part. I mean, you got the MGUH, the MGU car, and then they got the electrical components, and they're the components that they need to get right because they're the ones where they spend all the time and money to get that extra performance out of the motor. So the motor's not too bad. I think you can handle 5 places. It's when the other stuff that goes, the MGUH. I mean, that stuff just hurts teams if they're not getting the reliability out of it they need it. But I mean, F1 continues just to change the game this year, right? But from last year and the year before, right? You've got less parts, more races, less parts. So, I mean, we looked at the engine mode changes last year, and I think the engine mode changes is why we're not seeing Mercedes qualify as well as what they can. I think they can extract a hell of a lot more power out of that car for that 1 to 2 laps that they need it. But, I mean, engine modes are trying to peg them back. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. What do you think, Freya? I mean, that could throw massive spanner into the mix if Lewis just pulls off to the side of the road with smoke pouring out the back.
I mean, and then Perez is back.
There you go. Yeah.
But I just didn't realize
Oh, gee.
was capable of even tradition.
Yeah, there you go. I love that. That's a Heineken ad right there. Yeah, but it's going to be, yeah. Anyway, I just thought about it, just thinking, Bottas has taken a lot, Lewis not so much, but we haven't sort of thought about it since almost 2018. Campy and Danny Rick having the issues that he had with that Renault power unit and other bits in the car. We haven't seen in the last couple of years something that's sort of worrying in that same respect. And look,
Bottas has had some pretty memorable incidents this year where he's written off,
true.
3 cars. So there's the one in the wet with Russell earlier in the year. There was the one, what was the other one where he took out half the field off the start in Hungary. And there was another crash where he wiped the motor out too. So, I mean, that when they happen early in the season, this is what happens on the flow on.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Well, let's talk about what to watch for in the race. Of course, Hamilton and Verstappen, we've mentioned this already, but off the line. Campy, let's just get your pick. Who do you reckon is going to be leading out of turn 1?
My heart says Maximus, but my head says Hamilton.
Good double answer. Freya, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm exactly but I think Hamilton's going to have the.
I want it to be Hamilton because he's my mega driver for the week. That's how it influences who I care about. That's not Danny Rick.
You are pretty good in the fantasy league at the moment.
I am rubbish. I am so far behind. I'm trying everything.
I still haven't looked at it. Still haven't used a mega driver.
Stop. Yeah, you're still beating me. Ridiculous. Of course, the battle that's going to be interesting is McLaren and Ferrari. We've also spoken about this. I think Campy, you summated it very well in terms of McLaren will be wanting to get ahead of both of those cars, but effectively be a split, maybe DR in 4th, Charles or Carlos in fifth, Lando, and then the other Ferrari. But I mean, really, if it goes well and there's no red flags and there's no safety cars or any of those issues, Freya, as I said, McLaren probably a better race pace car in terms of looking after these tyres too. It's a lot warmer in Austin than we thought. Is there potential for both of them to get past Ferrari?
Oh, both of them.
Put you on the spot with that
I
one.
don't know about that. But I don't know about. And let's be clear, we only need one.
Yeah,
I
we
think
don't really care about one.
Look, I know. I like you said, I'm pretty pleased with I think by McLaren weekend with the corners that they haven't been historically strong on. Don't seem to be. I just think they had huge pre-practices, so they're doing better with their tyres. One can.
Yeah, well, and look, as long as it's DR, then as I said, who really cares? The other person that I have of interest is Valtteri. Of course, he starts in 9th. Ever since his announcement that he was going to Alfa Romeo, he's just been a much happier person. He's got really nothing to lose at this point. Potentially on for a podium as well. We saw him in Monza come from 20th to 3rd.
Nope.
And I mean, he's got the ability and no real care to be able to push past, but they're not very good at following other cars, are they, these Mercedes campies? So realistically, where do you think you could put him at the end of the race?
Top 5 would be good, but I think you'll probably pass Lando, and that'll be it. If there's incident, if there's incident.
Gasly might hold him up.
I think he'll get Gasly. I think he'll get Gasly pretty quickly, don't you reckon?
We'd hope so in a Merc, but also, is that his race? In saying that, Gasly's finished 6th fairly consistently through the year, so there's potential for him to have that pace and good strategy from AlphaTauri to put him in there. He's got Tsunoda that can potentially act as a bit of a rear gunner for that mid-pack battle as well. Let's not forget. And as I said, it's interesting to have the Ferraris, McLarens, and AlphaTauri sort of being able to help themselves out in terms of strategy. It's pretty rare. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well.
I'll be watching Stroll, hence our conversation on Monday with about him and the Vettel thing. I'm going to put the microscope on him for the rest of the year and follow him a bit more closely so I can get a justified opinion on where he's at.
And what do you think, Freya, about Stroll? Because Campy's obviously come in and said he's a 1 in 5 race person, but now he's more of a 1 in 5 year person. Is he going to have the ability to follow through, or is he just going to sort of try the alternate strategy and just see what flows out?
He's 1 in 5 years. Stroll's in the bin.
There it is. Good.
Love that.
Good.
Love that.
Oh, yeah, and that makes absolute sense. The other person that I want to watch is Fernando Alonso. Starts in 19th. I loved his strategy about going through those bollards in Russia. That was probably my favorite part of that whole race, especially because he just did it on the outlap and then did it in the race. It was like, oh, hey. Well, no one actually picked up on it. But he's got some great control of that car, doesn't he? And Freya, we know historically Renault and now Alpine are pretty good on their tyre consumption. If this is a high deg track, there's opportunity for him to get in the points, don't you think?
I think so. I think he'll have a really interesting cut some corners and get it done.
Plenty of cut.
Yeah, exactly. So no. Chance for points, especially once Mazepin it'll be fun. he'll get through pretty. So I'm here for Alonso on the points.
Yeah, good. Well, look, it's all to come. It's great to be able to get up and then watch it in the morning, our time. Of course, it's almost the opposite for you. It's late afternoon for you tomorrow. Well, you're almost in the time zone, aren't you, of when it should be shown. I am enjoying the UK people going, oh, we have to be up at 8 o'clock at night. How are we going to deal with that? It's like, guys, get over it. We've been up at stupid o'clock all the time. We managed to get hyped, but it's going to be interesting. Campy, all right, who's your podium? Who have you got?
Lewis, Perez, DR.
Oh, okay. Freya, who have you got?
Perez, Sainz, DR.
Yeah, I'm here for that. Something's going to happen with Lewis and Max that's just going to continue the championship fight all the way to Abu Dhabi. We'll just remain on the same points, and everyone else can catch up. I mean, look, if they crash out and Daniel Ricciardo just keeps winning, Daniel Ricciardo could be the World Driver Champion of 2021. Just saying.
Love that.
It's very unlikely, but there you go. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for your time. Freya, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for
Yes.
hopping on with us. A little bit of banter. It's great to see some Danny Rick merch behind you. And look, we'd love to have you back if you're willing to do so. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
No. And I thought, what would Scott Elkin say? Like,
Hey,
There you
good plug.
There's another
Absolutely.
cross plug.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
it is a
welcome.
big weekend. Thank you. And now I need to go and we'll catch up on Extreme E to see what's going on. But look, massive thank you to you for listening or watching wherever you are in the world. We love doing this. Don't forget you can jump into our Discord server and we have a great chat over the whole race. Lots of banter. I mean, the more people that join now, it's starting to get a little hard to keep up with how many comments are going on. But it's not a bad thing. It's great to have everyone from all over the place join us there. Thanks for joining us on Instagram as well. In fact, I want to mention as well, we've got someone jumping on and taking control of our Instagram, which is very, very exciting. He reached out to us, Lewis, from Geelong. It's not
No.
camping. Campy would have absolutely no idea. But Lewis will introduce himself on our socials. So big thanks to him for wanting to step into that. He's doing a sports management degree and marketing as part of the thing. So he's put his hand up. It's fantastic. So make sure you go jump across to our socials, Instagram as well, and support him there. But guys, thank you to you. Thanks for listening. Do all the good things that good people for podcasts do. And we will see you. We won't see you, Freya, but because it's just stupid o'clock in the morning. But for everyone in Australia, it's 5:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Tommy T will be joining us again, and Campy and myself, of course, as we review a Perez Sainz DR podium for the US Grand Prix. And chat, thank you so much. I know there's potentially a couple of issues with the stream and it not being perfect, but if you want to listen to the audio, it'll sound delightful, I promise. But we'll see you at 5:30 Australian Eastern Time tomorrow. See you, YouTube.